Hello and welcome back to the Millie Fox Show. This podcast is for the high-achieving woman. It's for the woman with big dreams and a big heart who maybe hasn't really been true to herself and is feeling like there's more for her in this lifetime, but she just doesn't know how to quite connect with herself and connect with her life again. So we're here to get you the juicy and deliciousest life possible through a variety of modalities. Okay, we're going to be looking at nervous system work, self-compassion, manifestation, psychology, storytelling, lived experiences. And today on episode 10, I'm going to be recounting some experience that I had last week at an in-person event that I attended in Austin. I recently decided to join in with a new mentor. His name is Nick Comodina. I've had many female mentors in the past. And this last few years, I've made an intention, a very intentional choice to start bringing more men back into my life because I surrounded myself with only women for many years and it kind of became a safe zone, a safe bubble. And what I have decided and realized is that I needed to tend to my relationship with the masculine, my own inner masculine, as well as my relationships with the external masculine. So that's a quick explanation, almost disclaimer, but I don't need to give a disclaimer as to why I have sought out a male mentor for this round of personal expansion and development. That being said, it was all very serendipitous and well-timed, and ultimately, man or woman, Nick spoke to a very unique thing that I was experiencing internally in this new phase of my life where I have shed a lot of my old identity, but haven't fully stepped into my new identity after my divorce, after my mom passing, after meeting my incredible fiance, blending our families, and rebuilding my business, and so on and so forth. So we had this 3-day event in Austin, Texas. It was my first time in Austin. Flew down there, didn't really know what to expect, and boy, was I sat on my ass, to say the least, okay? So the first day was really about revealing what's running the show. And I'm just going to share with you some of the things that we did and my experiences with it and my general takeaways from the weekend, even if those takeaways weren't directly from what was taught, but what I needed to remember and what you may need to hear from that. So on the first day, the big thing that stood out for me was this exercise that we did around shame and guilt. Now, if you don't know this, guilt is guilt is I did something bad, and shame is I am bad. I've taught this many, many times over. So guilt can be a productive emotion because it has us evaluating behaviors that are not who we want to be, right? They don't fit with who we want to be. And then shame is when we take those behaviors and we make them about who we are. So when we take what we've done and we say, I'm a bad person because I did this. So what we did was write down on one piece of paper a guilt statement and on one piece of paper a shame statement. And those were two separate things. They weren't necessarily the guilt statement that led to the shame statement. And we got into small groups. And we threw the papers in the middle, so we didn't know whose was whose. We picked them up and we read them out loud to each other. And then we all gave each other advice as if we were one another's closest friend for the thing that was written on the paper. And I just felt like this was such a great exercise. And we had 2 separate groups. We got into brand new groups, never met any of these people before, bearing your soul to the complete strangers, around the room. Very interesting experience. I can't say a very specific takeaway that I had from this other than we all experience shame. Okay. We all have dark secrets, and shame only exists in the dark and the silence. So an exercise like this, it seems like, oh my gosh, that's so heavy. But when you hear other people's, shame statements, you don't think that they're such a big deal. They think they're such a big deal. You think they're such a big deal when it's your own. But when it's somebody else's, it's like, oh, yeah, we all deal with this kind of stuff. I got you. I have compassion for you. We don't have the same for ourselves. But when we do this, we realize a very specific piece of compassion. This is part of the mindful self-compassion framework, which is common humanity, right? We all experience pain. We all experience judgment. We all experience these painful, shameful feelings and beliefs that we're inadequate or somehow not worthy or deserving of love. And by putting those things out in the open, it shines a light on them that says, no, we are not alone in this. And we are able to dissipate some of that shame. And then the guilt piece, when we tell other people what we're feeling guilty about, they can give us reassurance that we got this and we can correct our behavior. And it doesn't have to mean more than that. It's that we're human, we stumble, we move on, right? So that was a really cool thing to experience, is like hearing people's darkest shameful beliefs and then almost healing them in a very short period of time, right? The second day, we did something that was, to me, like, I've never experienced something like this. It was so radical. Okay. I think that is the perfect word for this. And now many of you have probably done some kind of breath work before. I have done lots of breath work in yoga, even some stuff that looks kind of freaky, like, the breath of fire, where you're like panting and pumping your stomach and things like that. But this was 45-minute deep breath work session. And it was a room of 220 people. I think I mentioned that already. Laying down in basically a ballroom inside of a hotel. Lights dimmed. We all had our pillow and blankets, so we were cozy. And then it was guided through music to take 2 deep breaths in and 1 strong breath out. Very strong breaths. It's almost like the Wim Hof breath method, if any of you have ever heard of that. But as you do this and you keep going, it's actually very physically demanding. You start to change states. Your brain waves start to change, right? And I think it's about the 12-minute mark where you really enter into a different state. And I have trouble releasing. I'm like you, girly. I'm an uptight overthinker, right? I'm a recovering perfectionist. So sometimes I even have trouble allowing myself to cry. So I was a little unsure if I was going to be able to go deep. But under the conditions of the scenario where we had all these other people around us allowing themselves, and we were bouncing permission off of one another. So what I mean by that is I'm going and then I hear somebody start to cry, and then we go deeper. And we got to a point where I did have a really good loud cry for I don't know how long. I did actually turn my phone on and video the entire thing. Pretty intense experience. I watched a little clip of it back, like though my phone was on for the entire 45 minutes. I watched like a 45-second clip, and just the audio on that was something I don't think I'm going to be able to revisit for some time now. I just wanted to have a record of it. And as we went deeper, I thought we were finishing up because I heard, Nick's voice and the music say, like, bring yourself back to peace, like, calm your body. Thought we were wrapping up. And then we went for another round and then another round. And I got to a place where I was just screaming, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, over and over again. I felt this release of from the people, the anger that I've been holding on to for the people who told me that I was not okay the way that I was, that it was not okay to be me 100%. And I released so much and I sobbed so much. I've never experienced that before. And then after that, kept going. I got to a place where I experienced this feeling of myself almost becoming like an angel, like a guardian angel for myself. And I felt this love for myself. I saw me looking down on me, and I felt the love that I had wished that I would have had from my own mother. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't just like this all enveloping feeling of love. It was like, oh, there's a glimpse of it. Like, this is what you've been wanting to feel for your entire life. And maybe you had glimpses of it throughout your childhood and perhaps moments that I can't really recall in my late teens and early adulthood. But I felt this glimpse of really this reverence almost for myself, and like, wow, if I were my own daughter, like, I thought about my daughter. I thought about Goldie. I thought about if she were my age and had done the number of things that I've done and had persevered the amount that I have and stayed positive and inspired and was using it to help other women give themselves permission, I would just wrap her in my arms and squeeze her and tell her how loved she is. It was not an easy thing to imagine because we have such a hard time giving ourselves the grace that we give to other people. But I felt it in that moment, and it was a revelation. I don't use really religious Christian terms, but if that is what it is, that's exactly what it was. It was a revelation that let me know that I can cultivate those feelings for myself. And that was definitely transformative. It's not like I talk about, and I have talked about in the past, something called silver bullet syndrome. And I need to bring this up again. This is something that I've coined for when you think one thing is going to change everything. When you put all of your attachment onto this one thing. So, I could have come into this weekend thinking like, oh, I'm going to go there. My entire life is going to change. We can always be open to the possibility of that. I am always open to miracles. I've talked about this recently, but miracles stack. Miracles can be small. And that's why we always have to keep going, because what can happen if we have silver bullet syndrome is that we can feel like a failure if we do something we don't have some massive, revelation. I remember there was one woman who stood up during the conference and she said, I've been through some really big rock bottoms and I still continued with the same behavior afterwards. Like, is there something wrong with me? Or like, when or how do I get my big revelation where it's all going to change? And the coach that she had asked the question to said, well, is your life different now than it was then? Are you still doing those things that you were doing when you hit your rock bottom? She said, no, I'm not. She said, so I think that you're putting too much pressure and expectation on this massive instantaneous transformation that's supposed to happen in a singular moment. I think a lot of people believe that that's what a miracle is supposed to be, right? Because we hear about these things. We hear about, miracles from I don't know if it's Jesus, the Bible, like these massive things, and we discount the smaller miracles, but it really is eye-opening when you speak to other people and you hear their journeys, that it was always a series of small shifts that brought massive change. And that brings me a lot of peace, brings me a lot of comfort to know that, small things done consistently move mountains. And actually, that same coach asked the whole room and said, how many of you have had one moment that changed everything? And a few people put their hands up. And then she said, how many of you have had many small changes that led to the massive changes you've experienced to get you here today? And pretty much everybody put their hand up. So I want to really drive that home too, because I'm not sharing any of this that I experienced over the weekend to come out and say, oh, I had this absolutely massive life-changing weekend and now I'm going to be an entirely different person. And Nick actually said that at the very beginning. He said, the work is not done in this room. Okay. The insight, some aha moments, light bulbs will go on, but the real work is done out in nature, or as I would say, in the wild. You got to take all of this and go and embody it and apply it and integrate it. Okay. And then we did another sort of shame exercise where we wrote down the 2 worst things that ever happened to us. We got into groups. Again, this was on the 3rd day, not the same day as the breath work. After the breath work, we all needed to go home and just go back to our hotels, Airbnbs, and rest. The 3rd day, we did the worst thing that ever happened to us. And I was naive in that. I didn't think that we were going to end up sharing. And then, once again, we got into small groups with people we'd never met before and shared the worst things that ever happened to us. And that was really interesting because it was a bit different than the shame experience. In a sense, it felt for me more vulnerable because it wasn't something that was coming from inside of me. It was something that happened to me. And I don't really like to feel like a victim, right? I don't like to feel like people are feeling sorry for me. So that was interesting in that people reacted to it like, oh, that's pretty intense. But at the same time, they just saw me for who was standing in front of them now. That's the takeaway that I had for it. And again, that comes back to shame. That comes back to us making bigger problems of the problems that we think that we shouldn't have, right? And shining a light on our shame, shining a light on what we think makes us different and makes us an outcast and, cuts us off from human connection. And then on the final night, the 3rd night, we had a rave, basically, from 6 to 10 p.m. We finished up at 2. Actually, I think it was a bit sooner. And then at 6, we met up at a club. And for 4 hours, we had the craziest dance party. Not everybody threw down like I did. Not gonna lie, I was at the front with a couple of other people that I had made friends with, and we went so hard for so many hours. My knees hurt. I was dancing, so it was dubstep. I'm honestly not the hugest dubstep fan, but the Nick was DJing, and he had a couple of other of his friends in between, before and after him. And there was some really great throwback tracks from the 2000s that were, singable. And I was just drenched in sweat. Like, I just felt like I was moving so much of the energy, integrating, releasing. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful way to end the entire experience. And then the next morning I spent, just chilling by myself, getting ready for my flight to come home. And that was actually yesterday as of recording, but this won't be out until the following week. So my major reflection for this comes back to this, okay? There are 3 pillars that Brene Brown teaches to wholehearted living. And I am the biggest supporter of Brene Brown's work, especially in the gifts of imperfection and the three underlying, I'm not sure if she calls them pillars. There's 10 guideposts to wholehearted living, but then there's 3 pillars that are woven all throughout these guideposts. And there's no better kind of explanation or embodiment of these pillars than this experience that I just had, which are courage, compassion, and connection. So what I want to leave you with is to reflect on these 3 philosophies, these 3 concepts, these 3, if you want to call them virtues: courage, compassion, and connection. It took a lot of courage to say yes, to go to this event. I almost didn't go because what it meant for me was that I had to not see my kids for 12 days. I didn't want to give up that time with them because I love them. I felt like I was being a air quotes like bad mom by going and not seeing them for 12 days and choosing this. But my partner, my fiance, encouraged me. He said, you can't stall your growth and your development because of your guilt. So I was like, okay, this is a difficult choice for me. It doesn't mean that I just like clicked and I was like, yes, you're right. I gotta put me first. It still was hard for me. I, as of time of recording, still haven't seen them. I'm gonna see them tomorrow night. So there was that. It took courage to bare my soul to strangers. It took courage to open up and release and fully, like, audibly scream and swear and cry in a room of 220 people. Oh, and at the very end, I put my hand up, got on the mic, and shared with the room what my experience was as well, which a lot of people came up to me afterwards and they were like, I've felt the same way about wishing that I had different love from one of my parents. So, thank you for saying that. And it took a lot of courage to make the investment, right? Like, not just the time, but the investment to come. And then the second thing is compassion. Okay. Compassion is something that I will continue to harp on until I'm blue in the face, because I know all of you are recovering perfectionists, overthinkers, etc., etc. And compassion is the antidote to perfectionism. And there are 3 parts to mindful self-compassion. And now this is Dr. Kristen Neff, her work. And that's mindfulness, it's loving kindness, and it's common humanity. Okay. So it takes compassion for yourself to be able to move through shame, right? Shame is the underbelly of perfectionism. So when you come to not just an event like this, but when you join any kind of community, it brings in more compassion into your life because you're experiencing co-regulation with other people. You're experiencing the compassion. They're lending you their compassion, right? And that helps you develop more of your own. It's like scaffolding. You're borrowing their compassion until you learn your own. Mindfulness. Okay, so there's common humanity, which I talked about a little bit earlier, which is knowing that we all experience the same struggles. There's mindfulness, which is not sweeping things under the rug, but also not over-identifying with problems, emotions, thoughts, etc., right? We need to find a middle way in order to have compassion for ourselves, acknowledging what is. And then the third piece is loving kindness, which is what a lot of people think about when they think about self-compassion, which is speaking kindly to ourselves, being gracious with ourselves, gentle with ourselves. And there was a lot of compassion that was offered in the room. And the third piece is connection. No better way to regulate your nervous system than with other people. Community. It's called co-regulation for a reason. We are hardwired for belonging as humans. And if you're trying to go it alone, you're going to end up, when you isolate, you will end up in shame much more often. You will deepen your perfectionism. You will deepen your overthinking. You will deepen your self doubt. So you need to be in community. If you want to heal, if you want to grow, it's not meant to be done alone. And it doesn't mean you're stronger. In fact, it's weaker to try to do it on your own because you don't have to be vulnerable. And vulnerability requires courage. And it also is interwoven with the compassion piece. So all three of these pieces, the courage, the compassion, the connection, they all come together. And it's how you will create the life that feels as good as it looks. If you're missing any of these ingredients, you need to go back and start nurturing them. Are you being courageous? Are you being compassionate towards yourself? And are you seeking out connection? It's really easy to go, nobody tries to connect with me. Nobody reaches out to me. Okay, are you open to it? Are you reaching out to anyone else? You always get back what you put out. So that's what I will leave you with right there is evaluate the courage, the compassion, and the connection in your life. And join a community. Get in somewhere and find your people. I do have an incredible community. And if you're interested in getting more details about that, you can come find me on Instagram at Millie Fox, MILLIFOX. DM me and I'll get you the details. And thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please take the time to subscribe. Share it if you think it was valuable, maybe privately with a friend, maybe publicly on your socials and tag me. And know that there's new episodes coming out every Friday, okay, on Spotify and Apple. And there's a whole previous season of podcast episodes that you can go back and watch. This is actually season 2. I had a full season 1, which is quite a while ago at this point, but there's 44 episodes there, and this is episode 10 here. Okay, I'll leave you with that. Sending you tons of love.